Amid the Christmas music filling the crowded Oak Ridge Mall in Queens, a woman in an $8,000 Chanel suit sat alone at a plastic food court table meant for families. Her platinum blonde hair fell in a perfect bob that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and her Hermes Birkin bag rested against the chair leg like it belonged there, which it did not. The makeup covering her face held flawless, despite the tears sliding down her cheeks. Black mascara tracing delicate lines she wiped away with trembling fingers before anyone could notice. If you asked the world what they thought about Elena Morrison, the 27-year-old CEO who ran a $50 million digital marketing agency, they would say successful, powerful, someone who had everything. They would be wrong. She did not have the only thing that mattered tonight, a single person who cared whether she lived or died. Her phone lit up on the table. A text from Victoria, her older sister, glowed against the scratched surface. Family emergency. Can't make dinner. Sorry. Elena stared at the words until they blurred. There was no emergency. There never was. Just another excuse in a decade of excuses. Another way to avoid the embarrassment of having a deaf sister show up to Christmas dinner where important people might see. She had known this morning when she woke in her empty penthouse that this would happen. She had known when she spent 40 minutes picking out the perfect outfit, when she practiced in the mirror how to smile naturally, when she clutched the certificate announcing her International Digital Art Prize win like a shield against disappointment. She had known, and still she had hoped. That was the cruelest part. The mall pressed in around her with its chaos of families and laughter and carols she could not hear. A mother hurried past with 3 children trailing behind like ducklings, the smallest one clutching a stuffed reindeer. 2 teenagers leaned against the railing nearby, sharing earbuds and probably music, their heads bobbing to a rhythm Elena would never access again. An elderly couple sat 2 tables over, the man feeding his wife bites of pretzel, their silence the comfortable kind that came from 50 years together. Elena watched them all with the familiar ache of separation, the feeling of pressing her face against glass, and seeing a world that moved too fast for her to enter. Deafness had taken her hearing at 14, stolen it in the same car accident that killed her grandfather, and left her trapped in permanent quiet. But loneliness had come from everyone else's reaction to that silence. This morning she had rejected the invitation from Maggie Chen, her executive assistant, and the closest thing she had to a friend. Maggie had offered to include Elena in her family's Christmas Eve celebration, her voice careful on the video call, her hands moving through the sign language she had learned specifically to communicate better. The offer was genuine. Elena had declined anyway, citing work deadlines that did not exist, because she did not know how to be a guest in someone else's happiness. She did not know how to sit at a table full of strangers and pretend she belonged when every previous attempt at social gatherings ended with her isolated in a corner, unable to follow conversations that moved too quickly for lip reading, unable to hear when someone addressed her from behind or the soda bum. It was easier to stay alone in her $4 million penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Easier to avoid the inevitable moment when people remembered she was different, and their smiles became strained with the effort of inclusion. Except tonight, the penthouse had felt like a mausoleum, and she had found herself driving to Queens instead. To this mall, the cheap, chaotic, working-class mall where her grandfather used to bring her every Saturday before the accident. He would buy her soft pretzels from the vendor near the entrance and let her pick out books from the discount store, and they would sit exactly where she sat now, at these same plastic tables, and he would tell her stories about building his company from nothing. He had gone deaf at 50 from an industrial accident, and instead of giving up, he had learned to navigate the world of business through pure determination and force of will. When Elena lost her hearing at 14, trapped in the wreckage of the car he had been driving, he was the only one who did not treat her like broken glass. He taught her to sign. He taught her to fight. He taught her that disability was just another problem to solve with enough intelligence and refusal to quit. Then he died 6 months later from injuries sustained in the crash, and Elena inherited his company along with the weight of proving he had been right about her. She had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, took over Morrison Digital Arts at 22, when the board tried to push her out, built it from 30 million to 50 million in revenue through sheer force of competence. She worked 16-hour days, fired anyone who questioned her capabilities, maintained perfect control over every aspect of her professional life. The business press called her a prodigy. Her board of directors called her difficult. Her family called her an embarrassment, though never to her face where she might read their lips. Tonight she had wanted to share her prize win with them, wanted to show the certificate proving international recognition of her digital art, wanted them to see she was not just a burden to be managed. They had not even bothered to cancel until 2 hours after she arrived. A small hand tugged at a tall man's sleeve 15 feet away, and Elena noticed because the child was pointing directly at her. The girl looked about 7 with blonde hair and pigtails and the kind of bright blue eyes that seemed too large for her face. She wore a puffy pink coat with a visible stain on one sleeve and light-up sneakers that blinked red and green with each step. The man she was pulling was clearly her father, same blonde hair, same eyes. But his were tired in a way that spoke of too many double shifts and not enough sleep. He carried Target bags in both hands, his coat worn at the elbows but clean, everything about him radiating working-class exhaustion mixed with genuine love for the child pulling his attention toward Elena. The girl's mouth moved rapidly, her expression earnest. The father looked over, and Elena saw the moment his eyes registered her tears. Most people looked away from crying strangers. This man's face shifted to concern instead. Then something else as he took in her expensive clothes and the way she sat frozen like a mannequin in a window display. He glanced down at his daughter, listened to whatever she was saying, then looked back at Elena with a question forming in his expression. The girl tugged harder on his sleeve. Elena watched the silent negotiation between father and child, watched him hesitate, then watched him make a decision that would change everything. They approached carefully, weaving between tables while Elena's heartbeat accelerated with sudden panic. She did not want charity. She did not want pity. She wanted to be invisible, to cry in peace before going home to her empty penthouse and her empty life. But they were already there, the father moving into her line of sight deliberately while the girl stood beside him with an expression of determined compassion. Elena straightened automatically, her CEO mask sliding into place as she wiped the last traces of tears away. Her hands moved to smooth her suit jacket, a nervous gesture she hated because it revealed vulnerability. The man cleared his throat, then seemed to realize the futility of the sound. Instead, he raised his hands slowly, fingers forming shapes Elena had not seen directed at her in months. "Are you okay?" The sign was careful, deliberate, slightly rusty but unmistakably American Sign Language. Elena blinked, fresh tears welling despite her attempt at control. Nobody had signed to her in so long. Her family had stopped trying after the first month. Her employees used the ASL interpreter at meetings but never learned themselves. Clients communicated through Maggie or email. This stranger at a Queens Mall on Christmas Eve was doing what her own blood relatives would not. Her hands moved in response before her brain could construct walls. "I am fine, thank you." The lie came automatically, the same lie she told everyone, but her shaking fingers betrayed the words. The little girl stepped forward suddenly, her own hands rising in clumsy but earnest shapes. "Hello, my name is Lily." Each sign was careful, practiced, the movements of a child who had been taught recently and was proud of her new skill. She smiled with the kind of unself-conscious warmth only children could manage, and Elena felt something crack in her chest. The father knelt beside his daughter, his mouth moving as he spoke to her. Elena could read the words on his lips. What did she say? The girl responded in a voice Elena could not hear, then turned back and signed again. "You sign very well." Elena's hands responded automatically, the muscle memory of communication she rarely got to use anymore taking over. "My daddy taught me," Lily signed back with obvious pride. "He says everyone deserves to be heard." Elena's hands stilled in midair. She looked up at the father, really looked at him for the first time beyond the exhaustion in the worn coat. His eyes held intelligence and something else she could not quite name, something that made her feel less alone than she had in years. He was maybe 35, with the kind of face that would be handsome if he ever got enough sleep, and hands that showed he worked with them for a living. Calluses marked his palms, and a faint scar ran across his right knuckles. Everything about him screamed working-class struggle, and yet he had taken the time to learn sign language well enough to communicate with a crying stranger in a mall food court on Christmas Eve. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" His signs were slower than Elena's fluid movements, but clear enough. "It is Christmas Eve. No one should be alone." The casual assumption that she was alone cut deeper than any insult her family had thrown at her, possibly because it was true. Elena hesitated, her instinct to maintain privacy warring with a desperate longing for connection. The truth was complicated, layered with shame and family dysfunction, and the kind of rejection that was difficult to explain to a stranger. But there was something about this man and his daughter that made her want to trust them. My family was supposed to meet me, she began signing, then stopped. The full truth was too pathetic, too revealing. I was supposed to have dinner with them, but they canceled. I do not want to go home to an empty apartment. The lie about the apartment slipped out automatically. Penthouse sounded too wealthy, too removed from the world this man and his daughter occupied. The father's expression shifted to something fierce and protective. Then come with us. We are going to have dinner and then go home to decorate our tree. You are welcome to join us. His signs held absolute sincerity. No pity in his eyes, just a simple offer of inclusion that made Elena's throat tighten. Lily had already decided, reaching out to take Elena's hand in her small one, with the innocent certainty that only children possessed. Her mouth moved with words Elena could not hear, but could guess from context. Please come. The little girl's grip tightened, warm and real and utterly trusting. Elena looked at the father again, searching his face for any sign of condescension or ulterior motive, but found only genuine warmth. She had been carrying something in her coat pocket all evening, and her fingers moved to touch it now. The Christmas card she had intended to give her family, the one with her careful handwriting explaining how much this holiday meant to her. Inside the card was the printed certificate announcing her International Digital Art Prize, $50,000 in a gallery show in Manhattan, proof that she had accomplished something real and meaningful. She had wanted to share this achievement with people who were supposed to love her, had imagined their pride, their recognition that she was not useless or broken. Instead, they had not even shown up to receive it. Okay. Her hands formed the sign with a trembling she could not control. Just for a few hours. The mall experienced a power surge just as they were gathering their things. The lights flickered once, twice, then surrendered to complete darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds, but the bright, festive atmosphere had transformed into something dimmer and more ominous. Through the tall windows lining the perimeter, Elena could see the blizzard outside intensifying, snow falling so heavily it erased the parking lot from view. The storm had turned serious while they were inside, the kind of Christmas Eve weather that would dominate tomorrow's news and trap people in their homes. Panic rose in Elena's throat immediately, visceral and overwhelming. Darkness terrified her in a way it did not frighten others because she could not hear warnings in the dark, could not hear footsteps approaching, could not hear danger until it was too late. When she was 9, Victoria had locked her in a closet during a thunderstorm as a joke, not understanding that for Elena, the experience was not mischief, but trauma. She had beaten on the door for what felt like hours, screaming silently into the void until her mother finally found her and pulled her out, angry at the mess she had made rather than concerned about her tears. The memory of that darkness, that complete isolation, had never left her. Now the mall filled with sounds she could not hear, with announcements over loudspeakers she could not understand, with the general chaos of too many people and too little light trying to reach the exits. Elena stood frozen by the fountain, her breath coming too fast, her vision narrowing to a tunnel. The professional mask she wore constantly, the cold CEO persona that kept everyone at a distance, shattered completely. Her hands clutched at her coat, her whole body trembling with the effort of staying calm while her mind screamed that she was trapped, isolated, completely vulnerable in a crowd of strangers who could not communicate with her. Then the father was there, moving into her line of sight with careful intention. His hands formed shapes she needed to see. Do not be afraid. Follow me. I will keep you safe. The words were simple, direct, exactly what she needed to hear without condescension or pity. Just a promise. The crowd surged around them as people tried to exit, tried to find their cars, tried to reach their families. Elena felt herself being jostled, felt the press of bodies too close, felt the overwhelming sensation of being lost in a sea of people she could not communicate with. A man's shoulder hit hers hard enough to make her stumble. A woman's shopping bag caught on Elena's coat. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows that made lip reading impossible. and she could not tell if people were angry or scared or giving her directions she desperately needed. The father reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. His grip was firm but gentle, anchoring her to reality when her mind was spiraling into panic. With his other hand, he held Lily, and together they formed a small chain as he navigated through the chaos toward the exit. Elena focused on his back, on following his path, on the solid warmth of his hand in hers. Lily looked back at her every few steps, offering small smiles of encouragement, her presence a bright point in the confusion. A security guard appeared in front of them suddenly, his mouth moving rapidly, his expression stern. Elena could not read his lips in the dim light, could not understand what he was saying, but she saw the sharpness of his gestures and assumed she had done something wrong. The panic that had been building in her chest peaked, and she felt her knees weaken, felt the room start to spin. Every childhood memory of being scolded for not responding, for not understanding, for not being normal enough, rushed back in a wave. The father stepped between them immediately, his body shielding Elena from the guard's line of sight. He spoke to the man, his mouth moving in what looked like calm explanation, one hand still holding Elena's, making it clear that she was with him, that she was not alone or lost or in need of assistance beyond his. The guard nodded after a moment and moved on to deal with other concerns. The father turned back to Elena and signed with one hand, awkward but determined. "He is gone. You are safe. We are almost outside." Lily squeezed Elena's hand, and the simple pressure of it, the uncomplicated comfort of a child's trust, helped Elena breathe again. They made it to the exit and pushed through the doors into the cold night air. Snow fell thick and fast around them, already covering the parking lot in a layer of white that made the familiar landscape look strange and dreamlike. The storm had turned dangerous, the kind of blizzard that would make travel treacherous and trap the unprepared. But standing in the glow of the mall's exterior lights, feeling the cold sting of snowflakes on her face, Elena felt her panic begin to recede. She could see clearly out here, could orient herself in space, could breathe without feeling like the walls were closing in. The father led them to his car, a 2008 Honda Civic that had seen better days, but was clearly well maintained. He opened the passenger door for Elena first, a gesture of courtesy that felt formal and oddly touching, then settled Lily in the back seat with practiced efficiency. Before he started the engine, he turned to Elena and signed carefully. "The roads will be bad. It might take a while to get home. Are you sure you want to come with us?" Elena nodded, surprised by the vehemence of her own certainty. The idea of going back to her empty penthouse now, of spending Christmas Eve alone after everything that had happened, felt unbearable. These strangers were offering her something she had not experienced in years. The simple gift of not being alone. More than okay. "Thank you for this." He drove carefully through the snow-covered streets, his hands steady on the wheel, his attention focused on the road. Lily chattered from the back seat, her voice carrying the kind of excitement that came from unexpected adventure. Elena watched the city pass by through the window, the familiar buildings of Queens made magical by the falling snow, and felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of it, the sense that maybe Christmas could be different this year. Then the car hit a patch of black ice and skidded sideways. The father fought to keep them on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as he steered into the skid. Elena's body pressed against the door, her heart hammering as memories of the accident that took her hearing flooded back. Metal crunching, glass shattering, her grandfather's hand reaching for hers as the world spun. But the father was better at this than teenage her had been at handling that drunk driver's sudden swerve. He pulled them out of the skid and brought the car safely to the shoulder, though his hands were shaking slightly when he turned off the engine. They sat in silence for a moment, the snow piling up on the windshield, the world outside muffled in white. "I am sorry." His signs were stilted with adrenaline. That was frightening. Elena shook her head firmly. "You kept us safe. Thank you." From the back seat, Lily spoke, her voice small but serious. Elena could not hear the words, but she watched the exchange in the rearview mirror, saw the father's expression soften as he looked at his daughter. He turned to face Elena fully, his movements careful. "My daughter Lily says you seem like you need a family tonight. I told her we just met you, but she insists you should not be alone on Christmas. His expression held a question, an acknowledgement of how strange this situation was, how unusual it was to invite a crying stranger home from a mall, but also acceptance, as if his daughter's instinct trumped social convention. Elena felt tears build behind her eyes again, but these were different, cleaner. She saw through the divider between front and back seats as Lily pressed her small palm against the window, as if reaching out to touch her. The little girl's face held such pure hope and uncomplicated affection that refusing felt impossible. The father got out to push the car free from the snowdrift they had slid into, his coat immediately covered in white, his breath visible in the cold air. Elena watched him work through the windshield. This stranger who had chosen to help her, who was now literally digging her out of the snow. The metaphor was not lost on her. She had been buried for so long, trapped under the weight of her family's rejection, her own sense of worthlessness, the accumulated disappointments of being different in a world that punished difference. And here was someone willing to get cold and wet and tired to pull her free. When they finally made it to his apartment building, the warmth that greeted them felt like an embrace. It was a modest brick structure in Woodside, the kind of building where working families lived, where neighbors knew each other's names and helped with groceries. She watched an elderly woman on the second-floor landing wave at the father as they climbed the stairs, watched him wave back with genuine warmth. In her building in Manhattan, she had lived for 3 years without learning a single neighbor's name. The father's apartment was on the 3rd floor, a small 2-bedroom unit that felt instantly welcoming despite its size. The furniture was worn but clean, every surface free of dust, everything arranged with care. The walls were decorated with Lily's drawings and school projects, bright splashes of color that transformed the modest space into something alive. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, half decorated, ornaments scattered on the coffee table, as if they had been interrupted mid-celebration. "Welcome to our home." His signs were shy, as if worried she might judge the simplicity of what he was offering. But Elena felt no judgment, only relief. She looked around at the warm yellow lights, at the stockings hung on the wall, at the simple beauty of a space filled with love rather than expensive things. It reminded her of the home she had imagined for herself as a child, before she understood that her family's version of success was measured in square footage and status rather than in moments of quiet happiness. Lily ran to her room and returned with a blanket which she carefully draped over Elena's shoulders. "You are cold. You need to be warm." The little girl's signs were improving already, probably because Elena's presence gave her someone to practice with. Elena pulled the blanket tighter, touched by the gesture in a way she could not quite articulate. The father disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, the steam rising in lazy spirals. He handed one to Elena and kept one for himself, then sat down across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. For a long time, they simply sat together in the warm glow of the Christmas lights. Lily worked on decorating the tree, humming to herself, though Elena could only see the vibrations in her throat, occasionally turning to show Elena a particularly pretty ornament. The father watched his daughter with the kind of gentle attentiveness that spoke of deep love, and Elena felt her chest tighten with an emotion she could not quite name. Eventually, the father picked up a notepad and pen from the coffee table and wrote carefully, "You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to tell me. But if you want to talk, I am here to listen. Or watch, I guess." He added a small, smiley face at the end, and Elena found herself laughing. The sound strange to her own throat, but real. She took the pen and paper, her hands steadier now, and began to write. "My family was supposed to meet me tonight. They promised, but they canceled at the last minute. They have never accepted that I am deaf. They see me as broken, as an embarrassment. Tonight was just the latest disappointment in a very long line of disappointments." The father read her words, his expression serious, and wrote back, "They are wrong. You are not broken. You are not an embarrassment. I can see that even though I just met you." "How?" Elena wrote, genuinely confused. "Because you chose to help a stranger instead of walking past. Because you taught your daughter to sign. Because you see people instead of just looking at them." The father smiled, something warm and real that transformed his tired face. "My name is David Brennan. I should have introduced myself earlier." Elena took the pen back. Elena Morrison. And I should have said thank you properly. Thank you for tonight, for seeing me. They decorated the tree together, the three of them working in quiet harmony. David helped Lily hang the higher ornaments while Elena arranged the lower ones, her artist's eye creating a balance and beauty that transformed their simple tree into something special. They drank hot chocolate and ate cookies that were slightly burned but still delicious. They played a card game that Lily taught Elena, the rules simple enough to follow without words. And slowly, gradually, Elena felt something inside her unclench. Some terrible tension she had carried for so long that she had forgotten it was there. Near midnight, there was a sharp knock at the door. David opened it to find a woman standing in the hallway, her expression cold and furious. Elena recognized her immediately and stood up, the blanket falling from her shoulders, her whole body going rigid with shock and fear. Victoria pushed past David without invitation and strode into the apartment. She was dressed expensively in a designer coat that probably cost more than David's monthly rent, her hair perfect despite the snow, everything about her radiating the kind of wealth and status that looked completely out of place in this working-class apartment. "What the hell do you think you are doing, Elena?" Victoria's mouth moved rapidly, angrily, and Elena struggled to keep up with the words in her peripheral vision while watching David's confused face. The fragments she caught were enough. Embarrassing the family, irresponsible, strangers, playing poor. David moved to stand beside Elena, his presence solid and protective. He spoke to Victoria in a tone that was calm but firm, though Elena could not hear what he said. Whatever it was made Victoria turn her attention to him, her expression shifting to something even more contemptuous. "And who are you?" Victoria's words were clear enough for Elena to read, dripping with scorn. "Some random man who thinks he can fix my broken sister? She cannot hear you, in case you have not noticed. She is useless, a burden, and she certainly does not need you playing hero." Lily burst from her room where she had retreated when the yelling started, her small face fierce with anger and hurt. She ran to Elena and wrapped her arms around her waist, glaring at Victoria with all the righteous fury of a child who had witnessed injustice. Elena could not hear what Lily shouted, but she could see the little girl's mouth moving rapidly, could see tears on her cheeks, could feel the protective embrace. Victoria turned her cold gaze to the child, then back to Elena. "This is none of your concern. Elena is coming home with me now, where she belongs." But David stepped forward, putting himself between Victoria and Elena. His hands moved at the same time as his mouth, signing for Elena's benefit, even as his words reached her sister. "Do you want to leave? Do you want to go with your sister?" His signs were clear, his face serious. "It is your choice. No one can make you go anywhere." Elena's hands trembled as she signed back, her movements small but definite. "No, I do not want to go. I want to stay here where people see me as a person, not as a problem to be solved or hidden away." Victoria's face flushed with anger and something that might have been shame, though she would never admit it. "You are making a scene. You are embarrassing yourself and this family." Elena's signs grew stronger, more certain. "I am making a choice. I am choosing to be somewhere I am wanted for once. I am choosing people who do not look at me with pity or disgust. I am choosing to start my life over away from all of you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with years of accumulated hurt. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. For just a moment, something flickered across her face, something that might have been regret or recognition of the damage that had been done. But it passed quickly, replaced by the familiar mask of cold superiority. "Fine. If you want to throw away your family for these strangers, that is your choice. But do not come crying back to us when this all falls apart. Do not expect us to take you back when he gets tired of babysitting a deaf girl who cannot even take care of herself." She turned on her heel and left, slamming the door behind her hard enough to rattle the frame. In the silence that followed, Elena felt her knees weaken. She had stood up to her sister for the first time in her life, had chosen herself over the family that had rejected her, and the weight of it was overwhelming. David caught her elbow gently, steadying her, and led her to the couch. Lily climbed up beside her and took her hand, holding it tightly. "You were very brave." David's signs held admiration and concern. "Are you okay?" Elena took a shaky breath and signed back. I do not know, but I think I will be. That night, Elena slept on David's couch, wrapped in warm blankets that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and cinnamon. She lay awake for a long time, watching the lights from the Christmas tree cast gentle shadows on the ceiling, existing in the silence that was her constant companion. But this silence felt different somehow. It felt less like isolation and more like peace. In the morning, Lily was the first one awake, as children often are on Christmas morning. She crept into the living room and found Elena already sitting up, watching the snow fall outside the window. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the city blanketed in white, pristine, and beautiful. Lily held out a small wrapped package, the paper wrinkled and the bow crooked, clearly wrapped by small hands without adult supervision. Elena took the gift with trembling hands, carefully peeling back the paper. Inside was a pair of knitted gloves, cream-colored and soft, slightly uneven in places, but made with obvious care. They fit perfectly when Elena tried them on, and she looked up at Lily with tears in her eyes. I made them, Lily signed carefully, the movements clumsy but sincere. So your hands will not be cold when you talk. The simple thoughtfulness of it, the recognition that Elena's hands were her voice, that keeping them warm meant keeping her ability to communicate intact, broke something loose in Elena's chest. She pulled Lily into a hug, holding the little girl close, feeling the way her small body fit perfectly in her arms. David appeared in the doorway holding 3 mugs, coffee for the adults and hot chocolate for Lily, his hair still messy from sleep. He smiled when he saw them embracing, a smile that was shown and genuine and full of warmth. He set the mugs down and sat on the edge of the couch, and for a moment the 3 of them simply existed together in the golden morning light. Strangers 20 hours ago who were beginning to feel remarkably like family. David picked up a notepad from the coffee table, writing in careful block letters, while Lily settled between them on the couch with her hot chocolate. I know we just met. I know this is all very fast and probably overwhelming, but if you need a place to stay while you figure things out, you are welcome here for as long as you need. No pressure, no expectations, just a safe place and people who care about you. Elena read the words 3 times, making sure she understood, making sure this was real and not some dream she would wake from to find herself alone in her penthouse again. The gloves on her hands were tangible proof of reality, soft and imperfect and made with more love than anything money could buy. She picked up the pen, her hands steady despite the tears streaming down her face. 3 words. I want to stay. David's smile grew wider, transforming his tired face into something almost beautiful. Lily squealed with delight, throwing her arms around Elena's neck hard enough to nearly spill the hot chocolate. They sat together on the worn couch, 3 people who had been strangers less than a day ago, now forming something that felt remarkably like the family Elena had always wanted but never had. The rest of Christmas morning unfolded in a rhythm Elena had only seen in other people's lives. They made breakfast together, scrambled eggs and toast that tasted better than any catered meal from her usual Michelin-starred service. David showed Elena how he organized the tiny kitchen with military precision, every utensil in its place, a system born from necessity rather than choice. Lily chattered continuously, her voice a soundtrack Elena could not hear, but could feel in the vibrations of happiness that filled the small apartment. They opened presents, nothing expensive but chosen with thought. David gave Lily a set of colored pencils and a sketchbook for her drawings. Lily gave David a card she had made herself, covered in glitter and hearts and the words "Best Daddy" written in crayon. Elena watched them with an ache in her chest that was equal parts longing and gratitude. This was what family looked like when it functioned the way it should. Not perfect, not wealthy, just present. Just loving each other through the ordinary moments that comprised a life. Her phone sat silent on the end table where she had placed it the night before. Not a single message from her mother or father or Victoria. The silence spoke volumes. By mid-morning, her phone finally buzzed with incoming notifications, a flood of them that made the device dance across the wooden surface. Elena picked it up with growing dread. 15 missed calls from various board members, 43 text messages, subject line screaming urgent and where are you, an emergency meeting moved to 10 a.m. today. Her stomach dropped as she scrolled through the messages from Maggie Chen, her assistant's careful words barely masking panic. Boss, the board called emergency session. They moved it from after New Year to this morning. Christmas Day, 10 a.m. Chairman Hartwell is furious you're not responding. He's saying this proves you're unstable. I tried to stall, but they're not listening. Please call me. Elena looked at the time. 9:45. The Morrison Digital Arts headquarters was in Midtown Manhattan, at least 40 minutes away even without holiday traffic. She had less than 15 minutes before the meeting started, before the board voted on her future without her even present to defend herself. Her hands shook as she showed the phone to David, watching his face darken as he read the messages. On Christmas? They cannot wait? His signs were sharp with anger on her behalf. Business does not stop for holidays. Elena's response carried bitter resignation, especially when they want you gone. She stood quickly, looking around for her coat and bag, her CEO instincts overriding the brief moment of peace she had found. I have to go. I have to fight this. Lily appeared from her bedroom, her face falling when she saw Elena gathering her things. But we have not opened all the presents yet. We were going to watch movies and eat Christmas cookies all day. The little girl's disappointment hit Elena harder than any board member's criticism ever had. David knelt beside his daughter, signing as he spoke so Elena could follow. Miss Elena has to go to work, sweetheart. Important people need to talk to her. Lily's eyes filled with tears. On Christmas? That is mean. They should let her have Christmas. They should. David's agreement was gentle but firm. But sometimes grown-ups have to do hard things even when it is not fair. We will see Miss Elena again soon. He looked up at Elena with a question in his eyes, the uncertainty of someone who had just met a person and had no idea if soon was a promise or a polite lie. Elena signed directly to Lily, making sure the child could see her clearly. I will come back, I promise. As soon as the meeting is over, I will come back here, if you still want me to. Lily nodded vigorously, then launched herself at Elena for another fierce hug. David walked Elena to the door, his notepad in hand. Whatever happens in that meeting, remember this. You are enough, with or without that title. The words settled into Elena's chest like stones, heavy and grounding. Easy for you to say. Her response came out sharper than she intended. You do not have 40 people depending on your paycheck. You do not have a legacy to protect. David's expression tightened, hurt flashing across his face before he controlled it. No, I only have one person depending on me. But Lily is my whole world. I understand pressure, Elena, just different kind. He stepped back, creating distance that felt like more than physical space. Elena wanted to apologize, to take back the dismissive words, but the Uber she had called was already pulling up outside. She scribbled quickly on the notepad. I am sorry, that was cruel, I am just scared. David nodded, accepting but not quite forgiving. Go. Fight for what is yours. We will be here when you get back. The ride to Manhattan felt like traveling between universes. Queens disappeared behind her, replaced by the gleaming towers of Midtown, the world of wealth and power she had built her life around. Elena used the time to transform herself, pulling her professional mask into place piece by piece. She finger-combed her hair into submission, wiped away the last traces of tears, straightened her Chanel suit that had gotten wrinkled sleeping on David's couch. By the time the car pulled up to the Morrison Digital Arts building, she looked like the CEO everyone expected. Cold, controlled, untouchable. The boardroom was glass and steel and minimalist design, everything in it chosen to project power and success. 7 board members sat around the polished table, 5 men and 2 women, average age 55 and up. All of them hearing, and most of them old enough to remember when deaf people were still institutionalized rather than integrated. Chairman Richard Hartwell sat at the head of the table, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expression radiating disapproval. The ASL interpreter Morrison Digital employed for legal compliance stood in the corner, her hands ready, but her face neutral in that way professionals had when they were about to witness something ugly. Miss Morrison, Hartwell's voice carried across the room, filtered through the interpreter's signs. Glad you could join us. On Christmas. His tone made it clear this was not gladness, but condemnation. You called emergency meeting. Elena's voice was measured, each word carefully pronounced the way she had practiced for years. I came. She moved to her usual seat at the table, the one her grandfather had occupied before her, and met each board member's eyes in turn. Patricia Chen looked uncomfortable, avoiding Elena's gaze. James Whitmore at least had the decency to appear conflicted. The others ranged from neutral to openly hostile. "We are concerned." Hartwell leaned forward, his fingers steepled in a gesture Elena recognized as performative authority. "Your behavior has become erratic. Missing family obligations. Spotted at a Queens mall far beneath your usual standards. Spending the night with unknown individuals. For a CEO of a $50 million company, these choices raise questions about your judgment." So Victoria had wasted no time reporting Elena's whereabouts to the board, probably framing it as evidence of instability rather than what it actually was, a lonely person finding unexpected kindness. Elena kept her face carefully blank. "My personal life is private. It does not affect my work performance." "Does it not?" Hartwell slid a folder across the table. Q4 profits down 3%. 3 clients complained about communication issues. "Your grandfather built this company on respectability, on reliability. We are seeing neither." Elena picked up the folder, scanning the numbers she already knew by heart. Q4 profits are down industry-wide by 5%. We are outperforming market conditions. She signed as she spoke, making sure the interpreter caught every word. "As for client complaints about communication issues, those are complaints about my deafness, not my competence. Perhaps you should examine which clients have the problem and which CEO you are trying to remove." Board member Patricia Chen finally looked up, her expression pained. "Elena, we are not trying to attack you. We are worried. The company needs strong leadership. And if you are going through personal struggles, maybe it is time to consider whether this role is too much stress." Translation: maybe it is time for the deaf girl to step aside for someone more normal. Elena had heard variations of this argument her entire professional life. What you call personal struggles, I call having a life outside this boardroom. Something I am entitled to. My performance metrics speak for themselves. Client satisfaction up 40%. Employee retention 95% when industry average is 60. Revenue stable despite economic downturn. These are facts, not feelings. James Whitmore cleared his throat. "The board appreciates your contributions, Elena. No one disputes you have worked hard. But leadership is about more than numbers. It is about perception, about representing the company to the world. And frankly, a deaf CEO creates obstacles that a hearing CEO would not face." There it was, the real issue beneath all the corporate language and manufactured concern. They did not want a deaf CEO because it made them uncomfortable, made their clients uncomfortable, reminded everyone that disability existed and demanded accommodation. Elena felt rage building in her chest, hot and righteous, but she channeled it into ice. "My grandfather went deaf at 50 from industrial accident." She spoke slowly, clearly, making sure every word landed. "He built this company after losing his hearing. He chose me as his successor because he knew something you seem to have forgotten. Disability does not mean inability. It means innovation. It means solving problems from angles hearing people never consider. It means I work twice as hard to prove myself every single day, which makes me exactly the kind of leader this company needs." Hartwell's expression hardened. "The board will vote on January 2nd, after the holidays. We will give you time to reconsider your recent choices and perhaps step down gracefully. We can offer generous severance, a seat on the advisory board. You would still be connected to your grandfather's legacy without the burden of daily operations." His words were a trap disguised as mercy. If she stepped down now, she would never get the position back. If she fought and lost the vote, she would be publicly humiliated. Either way, they got what they wanted. "No," Elena stood, her voice cutting through the room. "January 2nd, you will vote, and you will see that I am not going anywhere. You want me out? You will have to force me out. Good luck explaining to the press and shareholders why you fired a CEO with record performance metrics, because you are uncomfortable with sign language." She walked out before they could respond, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her head high despite the trembling in her legs. The elevator doors closed on Hartwell's face, red with anger, and Elena sagged against the wall. The professional mask cracked, splintering into pieces as the reality of what had just happened sank in. They were going to vote her out. 4-3 against her, if Maggie's intelligence was correct. She had 1 week to change their minds or lose everything her grandfather had built. The Uber driver she had kept waiting took one look at her face and asked if she was okay. Elena could not hear the question, but she saw concern in his eyes reflected in the rearview mirror. She pulled out her phone and typed, "Just drive. Anywhere." The driver nodded and started moving through the empty Christmas Day streets of Manhattan. They ended up at Central Park, near Bethesda Fountain, where almost no one gathered on Christmas morning. Elena sat on a cold stone bench watching snow drift down through bare tree branches, her breath visible in the freezing air. Her phone rang with an incoming FaceTime call from Maggie. Elena answered, watching her assistant's face fill the screen, Maggie's hands already moving through the signs they used to communicate privately. "Boss, where are you? I heard about the meeting. Patricia called me. She feels guilty. She wanted you to know the vote is currently 4-3 against you." Elena signed back with hands that felt numb from cold despite Lily's gloves. "I know. I could see it in their faces. They have already decided, not completely." Maggie's expression was fierce. "We can fight this. The gallery show January 15th. Make it a public triumph. Show the board you are an industry leader. They cannot afford to lose. Get press coverage, client testimonials, prove your value. I am tired, Maggie." Elena's signs came slower, weighted with exhaustion. Maybe they are right. Maybe a deaf CEO is too much obstacle for a company this size. "No," Maggie's hands moved sharply, almost angry. "You taught me this when I first started working for you. You said obstacles are just opportunities in disguise. You said people who tell you something cannot be done are usually people who cannot do it themselves. Do not quit now, not after everything you built." The words hit Elena harder than the board's criticism had, possibly because they were her own words being used against her. She had told Maggie that during the younger woman's first week as her assistant, when Maggie had been overwhelmed by the demands of working for a deaf CEO who refused to slow down for anyone. Elena had built a career on refusing to quit, on proving everyone wrong, on being so competent that her deafness became irrelevant. But somewhere along the way, she had forgotten why she was fighting, forgotten that success without connection was just elaborate loneliness. The man and child I stayed with. Elena's signs were careful, testing. Are they real? Or am I making bad decisions because I am desperate? Maggie's expression softened. Are they good people to you? Yes, better than my own family has ever been. Then they are real, boss, and maybe the board vote has nothing to do with them. Maybe you finally found something worth protecting besides a job title. Elena sat with that truth for a long moment, watching tourists in the distance taking selfies with the snow-covered fountain. Maggie waited patiently, her face on the phone screen, the only warm thing in Elena's frozen world. Finally, Elena signed again. "I am going back to Queens, to David and Lily. Can you handle the board intelligence gathering?" "Already on it." Maggie's smile was sharp. "I will find everything we need to know about Hartwell's real motivations. Just promise me you will show up January 2nd ready to fight." "I promise." Elena ended the call and told her driver the Woodside address, surprising herself with how easily it came to memory after only one visit. The streets of Queens felt different in daylight, scruffier than Manhattan, but more alive somehow. The driver dropped her at David's building just after 2 in the afternoon, 5 hours since she had left for the board meeting that demolished her carefully constructed professional life. She knocked on the apartment door with hands that shook from more than cold. Lily answered, her face lighting up with pure joy. "Miss Elena, you came back." The little girl threw herself at Elena's waist with enough force to make her stumble. David appeared behind his daughter, surprise and something that might have been relief crossing his face. "Meeting over already?" His signs were careful, neutral, giving Elena space to explain or not explain as she chose. It was difficult. Elena's response was understated. "Can I stay a few hours? I need somewhere that feels safe." David stepped aside immediately, gesturing her into the warmth. "Of course, you are always welcome here." The words settled around Elena like Lily's blanket from the night before, simple but infinitely comforting. Connie Rodriguez appeared in the hallway carrying a casserole dish, her weathered face breaking into a broad smile when she saw Elena. The older woman's English carried a thick Puerto Rican accent, but she spoke slowly enough that Elena could follow her lips. "Mija, David said you might come back. I bring extra food. You too skinny." Elena found herself pulled into a hug that smelled like sofrito and unconditional acceptance. The afternoon blurred into evening in a haze of domestic normalcy that Elena had never experienced. Connie's grandsons arrived, teenagers who treated Elena with cheerful respect rather than the wariness she usually faced. They played board games that required no speaking, just strategy and luck. And Elena won twice through sheer competitive drive that made everyone laugh. Dinner was roasted chicken and rice with beans, nothing fancy but cooked with the kind of care that made every bite taste like home. Elena found herself cooking alongside Connie in David's tiny kitchen, learning family recipes that had been passed down through generations. Connie showed her how to season the chicken, how to know when the rice was perfect by feel rather than timer. "You have good hands, mija." Connie's approval was matter of fact. "Steady, like surgeon hands. Must be from your artwork, yes? I never cooked with my mother." Elena's response came out before she could stop it, the confession surprising her with its honesty. She had parties catered. She never spent odd time in the kitchen. Connie's expression turned sad. "My husband worked 3 jobs to feed our kids. He died at 52, never retired. Before he died, you know what he said?" The older woman paused, making sure Elena was watching her lips. "I wish I worked less and hugged them more. Success is not measured in dollars, mija. Is measured in hugs, in meals shared, in people who cry when you gone." The words hit Elena like a physical blow, so simple and so devastating in their truth. She had spent 13 years building a company worth $50 million, winning international prizes, proving she was valuable despite her deafness. And she had exactly 0 people who would cry if she disappeared. Her family would probably be relieved. Her employees would update their resumes. Her board was actively trying to remove her. But these strangers in Queens, people she had known for barely 24 hours, had welcomed her like she belonged. After dinner, David and Elena escaped to the fire escape, a narrow metal platform barely big enough for 2 people that overlooked the snow-covered street below. David handed her a borrowed coat before they stepped out into the cold, his thoughtfulness automatic and unstudied. They sat side by side, breath misting in the freezing air, the city lights of Queens spreading out beneath them in all directions. How did the meeting go? David's signs were gentle, giving her permission to share or deflect. "They want me gone." Elena's hands moved slowly, each sign weighted with exhaustion. "Vote is January 2nd. I have 1 week to convince them I am worth keeping." "What will you do?" "Fight, because that is what I do. What I have always done." Elena paused, watching her breath dissipate into darkness. "But I am tired of fighting alone." "Then do not fight alone." David's response was immediate, certain. The simplicity of it made Elena want to laugh or cry or both. "How can you help?" She did not mean it cruelly, just practically. "You are a repair technician. I am CEO of a company you could not afford to rent office space in. We exist in different worlds." David's expression tightened, hurt flashing across his face before he controlled it. "You are right. I cannot give you business advice or board connections or whatever it is CEOs need. But I can remind you that your worth is not determined in a boardroom. I can make sure you eat and sleep and remember there is life outside work. I can stand next to you when you need someone on your side." Elena felt something crack in her chest, some wall she had built to protect herself from needing people. "I could help you financially. I have money. I could pay off your bills, help with Lily's school, make your life easier. Let me do something for you in return." David stood abruptly, his face hardening. "No." His signs were sharp, almost angry. "I do not need charity. It is not charity. It is gratitude. You gave me Christmas I will never forget. Let me give something back." "Elena, I helped you because I wanted to, not for payment. Long taught is not a transaction where you owe me compensation." The mixing of English and what must have been another language she could not identify showed his agitation. "I did not mean to insult you." Elena stood as well, trying to bridge the sudden distance between them. "I am sorry. I am used to solving everything with money. I forgot people are not problems to fix." David's shoulders relaxed slightly. "I know you meant well, but my answer is no. I have my pride, and it is about all I have besides Lily. Let me keep it." They stood in awkward silence on the fire escape. the cold seeping through their borrowed coats, the easy connection from earlier that day fractured by the reality of their different worlds. Finally, David signed again. It is late. You should probably go home to your apartment. Get some rest before you have to fight your board. The dismissal stung more than Elena expected. Right, I will call a car. She moved toward the window leading back inside, but David caught her wrist gently, stopping her. I am sorry, I was defensive. You can stay if you want to. Lily would be heartbroken if you left without saying goodbye. Elena nodded, not trusting herself to sign a response. Inside the apartment, Lily was already asleep on the couch, curled up with her favorite stuffed animal. David carried her to bed with the practiced ease of a single parent, and Elena watched from the doorway, her chest tight with longing for this kind of casual tenderness. When David returned, he set up the couch for Elena with clean sheets and extra blankets. They moved around each other carefully, both aware of the tension humming between them. Before David retreated to his own bedroom, he wrote on the notepad one more time. I do understand pressure. When my wife left, she told the local newspaper I was an inadequate provider. Everyone in the neighborhood knew my failure, but I survived their judgment. You will survive your boards. Elena read the words twice, understanding this was his attempt to apologize without actually apologizing. Thank you for letting me stay. For everything. David's response was a small nod, then he disappeared into his bedroom, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and the sound of her own breathing. The next day unfolded with a domesticity that should have felt foreign, but somehow did not. Elena woke early from CEO habit, finding David already awake and making coffee at 5:30 in the morning. He offered to take her running through the neighborhood, and Elena accepted, borrowing sweats that were too big and running shoes that almost fit. They jogged through snow-covered streets where David seemed to know everyone, waving at shopkeepers opening their stores, stopping to help an elderly neighbor carry groceries upstairs. Elena watched him interact with his community and realized this was wealth of a different kind. Not money in a bank account, but connections that mattered. People who would help when times got hard, a place where he belonged. In her Manhattan building, she had lived for 3 years without anyone knowing her name. Here in David's working-class Queens neighborhood, people called out greetings, asked about Lily, treated him with the respect born from daily kindness rather than corporate position. After their run, David left for his electronics repair shop, while Lily went to a winter camp program run by a local church. Elena found herself alone in the apartment for the first time, and instead of leaving for her penthouse like any sensible person would, she stayed. She opened her laptop and worked from David's couch, checking emails and responding to clients with the same efficiency she brought to her corner office. But without the constant interruptions of her staff, without the performance of being CEO, she found herself more productive than she had been in months. At 3 in the afternoon, Lily burst through the door with the chaotic energy of a 7-year-old who had been cooped up all day. Miss Elena, you are still here. I thought you would go back to your big house. Elena pulled the little girl into a hug, surprised by how much she had missed her in just a few hours. Your home is better. The admission came easily, honestly. Lily beamed with pride. Really? But we do not have elevators or doormen or any of the fancy stuff. No, but you have love. That is rarer. Lily's homework for the day was a science project about sound waves, and Elena helped her create a poster using her professional design skills. They worked together at the kitchen table, Lily chattering about school and friends while Elena sketched and colored, their collaboration easy and natural. When David came home at 6, exhausted from a double shift covering for a sick coworker, he found them giggling over a finished poster that looked professional enough to win prizes. Something in his expression shifted when he saw them together, his tired face softening into something tender. You made dinner? The question was directed at the pot bubbling on the stove. Simple pasta with sauce from a jar. Nothing fancy but effort nonetheless. I wanted to contribute. Elena's signs held apology and determination. I cannot pay you, but I can help. They ate together, the 3 of them crowded around the small table, and the conversation flowed through a combination of writing, signing, and Lily's enthusiastic translation. David shared stories about his father teaching him electronics repair, about growing up poor but never hungry, about learning that honest work had its own dignity regardless of paycheck size. Elena found herself talking about her grandfather, about the car accident, about the isolation that came after losing her hearing when her whole family retreated from the difficulty of communication. I grew up with everything money could buy. Elena's hands moved slowly, thoughtfully. You grew up with everything money cannot buy. Guess who turned out richer? David's smile was slow and genuine. We both have things the other needs. Maybe that is enough. The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to examine. They cleared dishes together, moving around the tiny kitchen in a dance that was becoming familiar. And Elena felt peace settling over her like Lily's handmade gloves, imperfect but infinitely precious. The next morning brought a sharp knock on the door that shattered their fragile bubble of domesticity. David answered to find Victoria standing in the hallway again, but this time she was not alone. Their father, Robert Morrison, stood beside her, distinguished in his expensive overcoat, his face carefully neutral in that way wealthy men had when they were uncomfortable but too well-bred to show it. Elena's stomach dropped. Her father had not spoken directly to her in 2 years, communicating only through Victoria or their mother when absolutely necessary. Seeing him now in David's modest apartment building felt like universes colliding in ways that could only end in disaster. Victoria's mouth moved rapidly as she pushed past David into the apartment. Elena caught fragments, enough to understand this was an intervention disguised as reconciliation. Father wants you to come home. We all do. The words were lies wrapped in concern, and Elena's hands clenched into fists inside Lily's gloves. But then Robert stepped forward, and his hands moved in careful, deliberate shapes. Hello, Elena. I am sorry about Christmas. The signs were basic, clearly recently learned, but the effort behind them made Elena's breath catch. Her father was signing to her. For the first time in 13 years, her father was attempting to communicate in her language. Victoria's expression flickered with something that might have been jealousy before she controlled it. Dad has been practicing. He wants to connect with you properly. We both do, but you have to stop this. She gestured dismissively at the apartment, at David who stood protectively near Elena, at the evidence of working-class life that surrounded them. The board called an emergency meeting yesterday. They are worried about your stability. This is not helping. Emergency meeting. Elena's signs were sharp. You mean the meeting where they want to vote me out as CEO? Victoria had the grace to look uncomfortable. They are considering leadership transition. But Father can help. She turned to Robert. Tell her. Robert's signing was slow but sincere. I have connections. I can call board members, present your performance data, convince them you are a capable leader. But Elena, you have to help me help you. Come home. Let us present United Family Front. The offer was everything Elena should want. Her father's support, his business connections, the weight of the Morrison family name behind her. But the condition underneath remained unspoken. Leave David and Lily, return to the world where she belonged, stop embarrassing them with her association with working-class strangers. Lily emerged from her bedroom where she had been doing homework, her small face confused. Miss Elena, who is at the door? Victoria's contempt was immediate and transparent, even without sound. You are babysitting now? CEO of a $50 million company, playing house with a technician's child? Elena's rage was ice cold and utterly controlled. I am spending time with family, real family, people who see me as more than a problem to manage. Robert stepped between his daughters, his hands moving carefully. Your mother does not know I am here. I came because I want to support you, whatever you decide. But the vote is public now, Elena. January 2nd, 10 a.m., they are inviting press to board meeting. They want to make an example. The news hit Elena like a physical blow. Public vote with media present meant her humiliation would be industry-wide, a cautionary tale about disabled CEOs who could not handle the pressure. Or it could be her vindication, proof that competence mattered more than hearing. Either way, the stakes had just escalated beyond anything she had prepared for. What do they gain from public spectacle? David's question was directed at Robert, his voice carrying an edge Elena had not heard before. If they vote her out privately, it is internal business decision. Public means they want to send message. Robert looked at David with new assessment, recognizing intelligence beneath the worn work clothes. You are right. Chairman Hartwell wants us to prove disabled leadership is his liability. Make it clear to industry that Morrison Digital is returning to traditional standards, which means if I step down gracefully, they win quietly. Elena's hands move faster now, anger fueling each sign. If I fight and lose publicly, they win loudly. I cannot win. You can. Robert's response surprised her. By fighting publicly and winning, show the world that Def CEO is not only viable but superior. Make them vote against you on record, then prove them wrong through performance. His signs were clumsy, but his logic was sound. Why are you helping me now? Elena's question carried 13 years of hurt. You have ignored my deafness since the accident. You stopped trying to communicate, stopped including me in family events, stopped being my father. Why do you suddenly care? Robert's face crumpled, aged beyond his 58 years. Because I was a coward. Your mother said it was easier to let you be independent, that you did not need us interfering. I believed her because it was convenient, but watching you build a company alone, win international prizes alone, face the board alone, I am ashamed. You deserved a father who fought for you. I am trying to be that now, even if it is too late. The raw honesty in his admission broke through Elena's defenses in ways Victoria's manipulation never could. She had spent years hating her father for his weakness, for choosing her mother's comfort over her needs. But seeing him now, signing with hands that trembled from effort and emotion, she recognized something familiar. He was scared the same way she was scared. Scared of failing, of being inadequate, of not knowing how to fix what was broken. I will think about your help. Elena's signs were careful, non-committal. But I am not leaving David and Lily. Not for you, not for the board, not for anyone. Victoria's expression hardened. You are choosing them over your company, over grandfather's legacy. No. Elena's response was absolute. I am choosing to have both. To be CEO and have a life. To succeed professionally without sacrificing personally. If the board cannot accept that, then they are the ones with the problem, not me. Robert nodded slowly. Okay, I will help how I can. Call me when you are ready. He pulled out his business card and placed it on the coffee table, then left with Victoria trailing behind, her face tight with frustration. After they were gone, David signed carefully. Your father seems genuine, different from your sister. Elena collapsed onto the couch, exhausted from the confrontation. He is weak. He has always been weak. But maybe weak is better than cruel. The next days blurred together in a strange rhythm as Elena split her time between David's apartment and her own work. She would spend mornings at Morrison Digital, fighting fires and strategizing with Maggie about the upcoming public vote. Afternoons she would return to Queens, helping Lily with homework or cooking dinner with guidance from Connie, or simply sitting with David in comfortable silence that required no words. Her phone buzzed constantly with media requests, board member calls, Victoria's increasingly desperate attempts to control the narrative. Maggie called late one evening, her face on the video screen lit by her office lights. Boss, I found something. Chairman Hartwell has a conflict of interest. His son's company, Hartwell Media, bid for a contract with Morrison Digital last month. Your decision as CEO to reject the bid because it did not meet quality standards. Now Hartwell Sr. wants you out, probably hoping new CEO will approve his son's inferior work. Elena's hands moved quickly. That is corruption. Provable corruption. We can use this. It is also risky. Maggie's expression was worried. If you expose him publicly and still lose the vote, you will have made an enemy with nothing to show for it. Better than losing quietly. Elena's decision was immediate. Send me all the documentation. I will present it at the January 2nd meeting. By New Year's Eve, Elena had been living between two worlds for nearly a week. Her penthouse sat empty most nights while she slept on David's couch, her expensive wardrobe gathering dust while she borrowed Connie's casual clothes. The board vote loomed 3 days away, and Elena should have been preparing in her office, but instead she found herself at Connie's apartment celebrating with David's community. The small gathering was loud and warm and utterly unlike the polished New Year's parties Elena usually attended. Connie's family filled every available surface. 3 generations crowded into a space barely bigger than David's apartment. Music played that Elena could not hear, but could feel through the vibrations in the floor. Lily danced with Connie's granddaughters, her face bright with joy. David stood near the kitchen, talking with his neighbors, his laugh visible in the shake of his shoulders. At midnight, fireworks exploded over Queens, visible through the windows but silent to Elena's ears. David found her on Connie's fire escape, watching the colorful burst paint the sky. His hands moved slowly in the cold air. "Thank you for staying, for choosing us. Thank you for asking me to." Elena's response was simple, honest. Almost kiss moment hung between them, both leaning forward slightly before Lily burst through the window, demanding they come inside for cake. Elena's phone vibrated with incoming messages, dozens of them from Victoria and her mother and various board members, all about the vote, about strategy, about the public spectacle her professional life had become. David saw her face fall as she scrolled through the notifications. "You do not have to let them control this." His signs were firm. "This is your fight. Fight it your way." The words stayed with Elena through the next 2 days of final preparation. Maggie sent files of evidence against Hartwell. Robert called board members on Elena's behalf, using his connections to plant doubt about the chairman's motives. Elena practiced her speech, the one she would give before the public vote, refining each word until they carried exactly the weight she needed. The night before the board meeting, she stayed at David's apartment one last time. They sat up late on the couch, neither willing to name the tension humming between them. David wrote on the notepad they kept handy, "I will be there tomorrow. Front row, you will not face them alone. You will have to miss work." Elena's concern was genuine. "You cannot afford that. Some things matter more than a paycheck." David's response was immediate. "You matter more." Elena felt something settle in her chest, some certainty she had been avoiding since Christmas Eve. She wrote carefully on the notepad, "I am afraid, not of losing the vote, of what comes after. If I win, I am CEO again and have no time for this, for you and Lily. If I lose, I have time but no purpose. Either way, something breaks." David read her words, then wrote his response in block letters that filled the page. "Nothing has to break if we do not let it. You can be CEO and have a life. You can lose the title and find new purpose. The only thing that breaks us is giving up." The words were simple but profound, exactly what Elena needed to hear from someone who had survived his own public failure and built something meaningful from the wreckage. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his calloused ones, and they sat in the warm glow of the Christmas tree lights that David still had not taken down. Tomorrow would bring the public vote, the press, the board's judgment on her worthiness to lead. But tonight, wearing Lily's handmade gloves and holding David's hand in a modest Queens apartment, Elena Morrison felt richer than she had ever felt in her $4 million penthouse. Tomorrow she would fight for her company. Tonight she would rest in the knowledge that win or lose, she had finally found something worth fighting for beyond a title. January 2nd arrived with brittle winter sunlight that made the glass towers of Midtown Manhattan gleam like ice sculptures. Elena stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 5 in the morning, applying makeup with hands that refused to stay steady. The Armani power suit she had chosen projected authority she did not feel, all sharp lines and expensive fabric designed to make her look untouchable. She studied her reflection and saw the CEO mask sliding into place piece by piece, the cold expression that had protected her through years of boardroom battles. Except this time the armor felt thinner, more fragile, because she had tasted what life looked like without it. David had wanted to meet her at the Morrison Digital Building to arrive together as a united front, but Elena had declined. This fight was hers, and she would not use him as a shield or a prop. He would be in the audience as he had promised. Front row, silent support rather than active participant. That was enough. That was everything. The Morrison Digital Arts headquarters lobby was already filling with press when Elena arrived at 9:30. Camera crews jostled for position while reporters checked their equipment and compared notes about the story they were about to witness. A deaf CEO facing public judgment by her own board had all the elements of compelling drama, the kind of human interest angle that would dominate business news for weeks, regardless of outcome. Elena walked through them with her head high, ignoring shouted questions she could not hear, her heels clicking against marble in a rhythm only she could feel. The boardroom had been transformed for the occasion. Extra chairs lined the walls for press and observers, at least 50 people crammed into a space designed for intimate executive sessions. The board members sat at their usual places around the polished table, but their faces held the discomfort of people forced to perform their ugliness in public. Chairman Hartwell's expression was tight with barely controlled rage, his silver hair perfect as always, but his jaw clenched hard enough to see the muscle jump. Elena took her seat at the table, the one that had been her grandfather's, and placed her leather portfolio in front of her. Inside were the documents Maggie had compiled, the evidence of Hartwell's corruption, the performance metrics that proved her competence. Her weapons for a war she had not chosen but would not run from. The ASL interpreter stood in her usual corner, hands ready, face professionally neutral despite the circus atmosphere. Elena caught her eye and received a small nod of solidarity. Across the room, David sat in the front row of observer chairs with Lily beside him. The little girl wore her best dress, the one Connie had altered for Christmas, and her face was solemn with the gravity of an occasion she did not fully understand, but knew was important. David met Elena's gaze and signed simply, "You are not alone." Hartwell called the meeting to order at exactly 10 a.m., his voice filtering through the interpreter's practice signs. "We are gathered today to address concerns about Morrison Digital Arts leadership and to vote on a motion for CEO transition. As you all know, this meeting is being held publicly at the request of several board members who felt transparency was essential given the gravity of our decision." The lie was delivered smoothly, as if Hartwell had not engineered the public spectacle himself for maximum humiliation. Elena kept her expression blank, her hands folded on the table, every inch the controlled executive, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Miss Morrison has led this company for 5 years." Hartwell continued, his tone suggesting disappointment rather than accusation. "In that time, we have seen both successes and challenges. However, recent concerns about judgment, reliability, and frankly about whether the demands of this position are sustainable for someone with her unique circumstances have led us to consider whether a leadership change would serve shareholders' best interests." The phrase unique circumstances hung in the air like a slur. Elena had heard variations of it her entire professional life, polite corporate language for disability that everyone pretended was about competence rather than prejudice. Around the room, reporters typed frantically on laptops and tablets, capturing every word for tomorrow's headlines. "Miss Morrison, you have the floor to address the board before we vote." Hartwell's gesture was magnanimous, giving her just enough rope to either save herself or complete her own hanging. Elena stood, smoothing her suit jacket, and faced the room full of strangers waiting to witness her destruction or vindication. "Thank you, Chairman Hartwell." Her voice was measured, each word carefully pronounced the way she had practiced for years. "I appreciate this opportunity to present facts that may have been obscured by emotion and assumption." She activated the projector, and the screen behind her lit up with her first slide, a stark comparison of Morrison Digital's performance metrics against industry averages. "You mentioned concerns about judgment and reliability. Let me address those with data. Q4 revenue was $49.2 million, a 3% decrease from Q3. Chairman Hartwell presented this as evidence of poor leadership. Elena advanced to the next slide. "However, industry-wide average for digital marketing firms our size was a 5% decrease in the same period. We outperformed market conditions through strategic client retention and operational efficiency." Patricia Chen shifted in her seat, her expression troubled. Elena continued, her confidence building with each slide. "Employee retention is 95% when industry average is 60%. Client satisfaction scores increased from 78 to 89% in the past year. We won 3 industry awards, including the International Digital Art Prize. These are not the metrics of failing leadership." James Whitmore raised his hand. "Miss Morrison, no one disputes your work ethic or your intelligence. The concern is whether the communication challenges inherent in your situation create obstacles that a hearing CEO would not face." 3 clients complained specifically about communication issues. Elena had been waiting for this opening. Yes, 3 clients out of 68. She advanced to a new slide showing the client complaints in full detail. "Let me read you those complaints verbatim. Client A, luxury watch manufacturer. We are uncomfortable working with a CEO who cannot participate in phone conferences. Client B, high-end fashion brand. Our European partners do not understand sign language and find video calls with interpreters awkward. Client C, private aviation company. We prefer traditional business relationships without accommodation requirements. She paused, letting the room absorb the naked prejudice in the words. These are not complaints about my performance. These are complaints about my deafness. And I terminated all 3 contracts because Morrison Digital does not work with companies who value convenience over competence. We lost $2 million in annual revenue from those contracts. We gained integrity. The press gallery erupted in whispered conversations, reporters recognizing the story shifting beneath them. Elena pressed her advantage. My grandfather went deaf at 50 from an industrial accident. He built this company after losing his hearing, not despite it. He chose me as his successor because he understood something many of you seem to have forgotten. Disability does not mean inability. It means innovation. It means solving problems from angles hearing people never consider. It means I work twice as hard to prove myself every single day, which makes me exactly the kind of leader this company needs in a competitive market. The words landed with force, and Elena saw several reporters nodding, already composing sympathetic narratives in their heads. But Hartwell's expression had darkened, his careful corporate mask slipping to reveal genuine anger beneath. Miss Morrison, your defensive posture and dramatic accusations do not change the fact that this board has lost confidence in your ability to lead. We have a responsibility to shareholders to ensure stable, effective leadership, regardless of personal circumstances. Then perhaps shareholders deserve to know about your personal circumstances, Chairman Hartwell. Elena's voice sharpened, her hands moving into attack position. Specifically, your conflict of interest regarding my leadership decisions. The room went silent, every eye turning to Hartwell, whose face had gone pale. Elena advanced to her final slide, a detailed timeline of events. On November 15th, Hartwell Media, a digital marketing firm owned by your son Christopher Hartwell, submitted a proposal for a contract with Morrison Digital worth $1.2 million annually. As CEO, I reviewed that proposal along with 4 others from competing firms. Hartwell Media's proposal was rejected because it failed to meet our quality standards and client service benchmarks. On November 30th, you called the first informal board meeting to discuss concerns about my leadership. On December 20th, you formalized a motion for CEO removal. On December 24th, you moved the vote to Christmas Day, then to today, insisting on public proceedings. The timeline speaks for itself. Hartwell stood abruptly, his voice rising to a shout that Elena could not hear, but could see in his reddened face and aggressive posture. This is slander. My son's business dealings have nothing to do with my concerns about Miss Morrison's competence. Then why did you misrepresent our Q4 performance data to the board? Elena's response was ice cold. Patricia, James, when Chairman Hartwell presented revenue figures to you, did he mention that industry-wide performance declined faster than ours? Did he provide client satisfaction data? Did he explain that the 3 client complaints were based solely on prejudice against my deafness? Patricia Chen stood, her face flushed with anger that clearly was not directed at Elena. No, he told us you were losing clients due to communication failures. He said employee morale was suffering. He presented very different numbers than what you are showing us now. Because he was lying, Elena's voice carried absolute certainty, not mistaken. Not misinformed, lying, to manipulate this board into removing a CEO who made a business decision that negatively impacted his family's financial interests. That is corruption by any definition. The press gallery exploded, reporters shouting questions that overlapped into chaos. Hartwell was yelling at Patricia, at Elena, at anyone who would listen. His careful corporate demeanor shattered completely. The other board members were standing, arguing amongst themselves, the meeting dissolving into exactly the kind of public spectacle Hartwell had wanted, but not in the direction he had planned. Order, James Whitmore's voice cut through the case, his hands raised for silence. This is a serious accusation, Miss Morrison. Do you have documentation to support these claims? Elena placed a thumb drive on the table. Complete email chains, proposal comparisons, timeline analysis, and the minutes from board meetings where Chairman Hartwell misrepresented company performance data. All of it is documented and available for independent verification. Patricia Chen reached for the thumb drive, her expression grim. I move that we postpone this vote pending investigation of Chairman Hartwell's conduct. We cannot proceed with confidence when the person calling for CEO removal appears to have ulterior motives. I second that motion. James Whitmore's support was immediate. Chairman Hartwell, I believe you should recuse yourself from these proceedings. Hartwell's face had gone from pale to purple, rage and humiliation warring for dominance. Fine. Investigate all you want. But remember that Miss Morrison has been playing house with some working-class mechanic and his child for the past week. If you want to question someone's judgment and priorities, start there. The low blow landed exactly as Hartwell intended, shifting attention from his corruption to Elena's personal life. Reporters turned their cameras toward David, who sat perfectly still in the front row, his face carefully blank but his hands clenched white-knuckled on his knees. Lily looked confused and scared, pressing closer to her father. Elena's rage was volcanic, but she channeled it into glacial calm. My personal relationships are not subject to board approval. However, since you raised the issue publicly, let me be equally public in my response. Her hands moved as she spoke, signing along with her words so David could follow. Yes, I spent Christmas with David Brennan and his daughter Lily. They offered me kindness when my own family offered only rejection. They treated me like a person rather than a problem to solve. And they reminded me that success without human connection is just elaborate loneliness. She turned to face the press gallery directly, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. I am deaf. I am CEO of a $50 million company. I am in a relationship with a working-class electronics repair technician who has more integrity in his hands than most wealthy men have in their entire bodies. All of those things are true simultaneously, and none of them disqualify me from effective leadership. The only question before this board is whether they will choose competence over prejudice. The room erupted again, but this time the energy felt different, shifted in Elena's favor by her refusal to be shamed. Patricia Chen stood again, her expression resolute. I call for an immediate vote, not on CEO removal, but on Chairman Hartwell's resignation for conflict of interest and misrepresentation of company data. All in favor? 4 hands went up immediately, Patricia and James joined by 2 other board members who clearly wanted distance from Hartwell's sinking ship. Against? Only Hartwell himself and 1 loyalist raised their hands. The vote was 6-2, decisive and damning. Patricia's voice was firm as she addressed Hartwell directly. Your resignation is effective immediately. Please leave this meeting and the building. Hartwell stood frozen for a moment, the full weight of his public humiliation sinking in. Then he grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, shouldering past reporters who shouted questions he ignored. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the glass walls. Patricia Chen took the chairman's seat, her assumption of authority seamless despite the chaos. Now, the original question before this board was whether Elena Morrison should continue as CEO of Morrison Digital Arts. I move that we vote to retain Miss Morrison and commend her performance over the past 5 years. The difficulties she has faced were manufactured by a corrupt chairman, not created by her leadership. I second. James Whitmore's support was immediate and firm. All in favor of retaining Elena Morrison as CEO? Patricia's voice carried hope and determination. 5 hands rose. Only Hartwell's former loyalist abstained, too compromised by association to vote either way, but unwilling to commit to opposition. The vote was 5-2 in favor, decisive enough to silence any future challenges. Motion carries. Patricia's smile was genuine. Miss Morrison, congratulations. This board owes you an apology for the stress and humiliation of these proceedings. Your grandfather would be proud. Elena felt her knees weaken with relief so profound it was almost painful. She had won, against corruption and prejudice and her own family's attempts to undermine her. She had won. The press gallery erupted in questions, cameras flashing, reporters swarming toward her for quotes and reactions. But Elena's eyes found David across the room, saw him signing with tears streaming down his face. I am so proud of you. The rest of the meeting blurred past in a haze of legal formalities and press interviews. Elena answered questions with the same controlled competence she brought to every professional interaction. But part of her awareness stayed fixed on David and Lily, waiting patiently in the observer section. When the official proceedings finally ended and the press began to disperse, Patricia Chen approached Elena privately. I am sorry. The older woman's face held genuine regret. Hartwell lied to all of us. I should have questioned his data more critically instead of accepting his narrative about your struggles. You deserve better from this board. You gave me better today. Elena's response was gracious despite exhaustion. Thank you for standing up when it mattered. Your speech about disability and innovation, that will be quoted in business schools for years. Patricia's smile was warm, but the part about success without human connection being elaborate loneliness, that is the truth everyone needs to hear. Do not lose that perspective as you move forward. Elena nodded, unable to trust her voice for a moment. Patricia squeezed her shoulder and left, and finally Elena was free to cross the room to where David and Lily waited. The little girl launched herself at Elena's waist with enough force to make her stumble, and David's arms came around them both in an embrace that felt like coming home after a war. They did not speak in the building, surrounded by lingering reporters and curious employees. David simply held Elena's hand and led her out to the street where his old Honda waited at a parking meter. The ride back to Queens was silent, Lily dozing in the back seat from emotional exhaustion, David's attention focused on navigating through afternoon traffic. Elena watched Manhattan disappear behind them and felt the CEO mask finally crack and fall away, leaving her raw and vulnerable and utterly drained. At David's apartment, Connie was waiting with dinner already prepared, and the television turned to the business news channel where Elena's face filled the screen under headlines praising her courage and condemning corporate corruption. Elena watched herself on TV, defending her right to exist as both deaf and competent, and the surreal disconnect between public victory and private exhaustion made her laugh until she cried. David pulled her into his arms on the couch, holding her while she shook with reaction to the day's events. Lily curled up on her other side, and the three of them sat in silence while CNN replayed clips of Elena's speech and Patricia's dramatic vote. Finally, David picked up the notepad and wrote, "You were magnificent, terrifying and magnificent. I was terrified." Elena's written response came in shaky letters. "Still am. I won the vote, but the real work starts now, proving I can be CEO and have a life. Showing them disability is not weakness. You already proved that today." David's next words were careful, thoughtful, "But you do not have to prove it to me. I already know." They ordered pizza because no one had energy to cook, and ate sitting on the floor around Connie's coffee table because she had refused to leave until she knew Elena was fed and safe. The older woman regaled them with stories about calling her entire family to watch the board meeting live, about her grandsons cheering when Patricia voted to keep Elena, about the neighborhood already buzzing with pride that their David was dating a CEO who had publicly defended her love for a working-class man. When Connie finally left and Lily fell asleep on the couch, David and Elena found themselves alone together for the first time since the victory. The apartment felt different now, charged with possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. David wrote on the notepad because signing felt too exposed for what he needed to say. "What happens now? You won. You are CEO again, which means you go back to your real life. This is my real life." Elena's response was immediate, fierce. "You and Lily are not some fantasy I retreat to when work gets hard. You are what makes work bearable, but you cannot live on my couch forever." David's practical nature asserted itself. "You have a penthouse in Manhattan, important job, responsibilities. I live in Queens in a 2-bedroom apartment I can barely afford. We exist in different worlds, Elena. Then we build a bridge between those worlds." Elena took the pen back. "I do not want to choose between being CEO and being with you. I want both, and I am going to figure out how to have both." The conversation stretched late into the night, both of them working through logistics and fears and hopes with the careful attention of people who knew what they were risking. By the time they finally retreated to separate rooms, exhausted and emotionally wrung out, they had agreed to date properly. No more living on David's couch. No more avoiding the class differences that made their relationship complicated. Just honest effort to see if what they felt could survive the reality of their vastly different lives. The next week tested that agreement in ways neither had anticipated. On January 4th, David came to Elena's penthouse for the first time, arriving in his work clothes because he had come straight from his repair shop. Elena watched his face as he took in the 3,000 square feet of luxury minimalism, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. the designer furniture, and original artwork that cost more than most people's cars. His expression was carefully neutral, but she saw the way his shoulders tensed, the discomfort of someone out of their element and aware of it. "This is bigger than my whole building." David's voice carried wonder mixed with something that might have been intimidation. "Elena, I knew you were wealthy, but this is different level. It is just space." Elena tried to minimize the gap between them. "Expensive, empty space that I barely use." They ordered Chinese food because Elena's kitchen had almost nothing in it, evidence of a life lived entirely through restaurants and catered meals. They ate at her massive dining table that seated 12, and the absurdity of two people with takeout containers at a table designed for elaborate dinner parties made them both laugh. But underneath the laughter was tension neither wanted to name, the reality that their lives operated on such different scales that bridging the gap might require more than just willingness. On January 6th, Elena visited David's electronics repair shop in Astoria. The storefront was small and cluttered with broken devices waiting for attention, the walls covered in handwritten price lists and faded posters about recycling electronics. David worked alongside two other technicians, all of them dressed in matching polo shirts with the shop's logo embroidered on the chest. Elena watched him repair an elderly woman's radio with infinite patience, explaining each step in simple terms, charging only $20 for 2 hours of work that barely covered his costs. After the woman left, clutching her restored radio with tears of gratitude, Elena confronted him. "You lost money on that repair. The radio is worth maybe $10. You charged $20 and spent 2 hours. Mrs. Chen is on fixed income." David's signs were defensive. Her husband gave her that radio before he died. "I gave her back his voice. That is worth more than profit margin." The contrast between David's definition of valuable work and Elena's corporate understanding of profitable business should have created friction. Instead, Elena found herself reconsidering everything she had built her career on. "I spent 10 years building a company worth $50 million. You spent 2 hours giving a widow back her husband's voice. Tell me who did more valuable work today." The question hung between them, sincere rather than rhetorical. David's expression softened. "Different kinds of value. Both matter. You employ 40 people who feed their families from their paychecks. I make 10 repairs a week that bring people small moments of joy. Neither is better. Both are necessary." On January 8th, the press discovered their relationship properly. Paparazzi photos appeared online showing Elena and David holding hands in Queens, walking through his neighborhood with Lily between them. The headlines ranged from supportive to cruelly classist. Def CEO's inspiring romance with blue-collar boyfriend competed with Morrison heiress, slumming in Queens, and what does she see in him? Elena's new board members called an informal meeting to discuss the optics, their concern careful and corporate. Patricia Chen's face on the video conference call held sympathy mixed with pragmatism. "Elena, your personal life is your own, but there are shareholders and clients asking questions. Not about David specifically, but about whether this relationship suggests instability or poor judgment. I am not saying they are right. I am saying you need to be prepared for scrutiny. Let them scrutinize." Elena's response was calm but absolute. "My relationship with David does not affect my job performance. If shareholders have concerns, they can review our quarterly results and client satisfaction scores. Both are excellent. I agree completely." Patricia's support was genuine, but I wanted you prepared for the questions. Some people will never understand why a CEO dates a technician. Those people have never met David. Elena ended the call and immediately texted David about the paparazzi photos, warning him that his privacy was about to become collateral damage in her public life. His response came quickly, typed on his phone. "I knew what I was getting into when I signed 'You are not alone' at a mall food court. We will handle it together." But the real test came on January 10th when David's ex-wife Jessica appeared without warning at his apartment. Elena was there cooking dinner with Lily when the knock came, and she watched David's face go pale as he opened the door to reveal a woman who could only be the mother who had abandoned them 5 years earlier. Jessica was beautiful in that polished way expensive maintenance created, her clothes designer and her hair salon perfect, everything about her radiating the kind of wealth she had left David to pursue. "I saw the news." Jessica's voice carried through the apartment, and Elena could read enough of her lips to follow the conversation. You are dating a CEO? Really, David? You replaced me with a billionaire? David's response was controlled, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. I did not replace you. You left, and Elena is not a billionaire. She is a person I love who happens to run a company. Jessica's eyes found Elena in the kitchen, assessment sharp and calculating. So you are the deaf one. The words were not quite cruel but carried enough edge to sting. Lucky for David, you have money to make up for other deficiencies. Elena crossed the room before David could intervene, her CEO mask sliding into place with practiced ease. She signed as she spoke, making sure David could follow. I am Elena Morrison, and my deafness is not a deficiency. It is simply a characteristic, like your apparent lack of basic courtesy. Jessica blinked, surprised by the direct confrontation. I came to see my daughter. I have rights. Lily had retreated to her bedroom at the first sound of raised voices, and Elena could see David torn between protecting his child and dealing with his ex-wife. She made the decision for him, signing to David. Talk to her. I will stay with Lily. In Lily's bedroom, Elena found the little girl curled up on her bed with her stuffed animals, tears streaming down her face. The child's voice was small and scared. Is my mommy taking me away? I do not want to go with her. I want to stay with Daddy and you. Elena pulled Lily into her arms, holding the trembling child close. No one is taking you anywhere you do not want to go. Your daddy will make sure you are safe, I promise. But what if she makes him go with her? What if they get back together and you leave? Lily's fear was raw and honest in the way only children could manage. I am not leaving. Elena signed the words so Lily could see them clearly. Whatever happens with your mother, I am not leaving you or your daddy. You are stuck with me now. The confrontation in the living room lasted nearly an hour. David's voice rising and falling in argument, Elena could not fully follow. When Jessica finally left, slamming the door behind her, David's face was drawn with exhaustion. Elena emerged from Lily's room with the question written on her expression. She wants partial custody. David's signs were heavy with defeat. Claims she is sober and stable now, has a good job, wants to be part of Lily's life again. She threatened to take me to court if I refuse. Do you believe she has changed? Elena asked directly. I do not know. David collapsed onto the couch. Part of me wants to believe people can change, can fix their mistakes. Part of me remembers her walking out on a 2-year-old without looking back. How do I trust that? You do not have to decide tonight. Elena sat beside him, taking his hand. You can require supervised visits, family therapy, slow reintroduction. Protect Lily while giving Jessica a chance to prove she means it. The wisdom in Elena's response came from her own experience with family members who claimed they wanted connection but really wanted control. David looked at her with something like awe. How did you get so wise about dysfunctional families? Years of practice. Elena's smile was sad. My family wrote the manual. The week of stress and adjustment culminated in the gallery opening on January 15. The International Digital Art Gallery in Chelsea had transformed its main space into a showcase of Elena's work. 20 pieces exploring themes of isolation and connection through digital media. The opening night drew art critics and collectors, business press covering the CEO as artist angle, and Elena's family minus Victoria, who had sent a terse text declining to attend. Elena wore a blue silk dress that cost more than David's monthly rent, but had chosen it because blue had been her grandfather's favorite color on her. David arrived in a rented tuxedo looking uncomfortable but determined. Lily in a thrift store dress that Connie had altered into something special. They looked modest among the designer gowns and expensive jewelry filling the gallery, but Elena's heart swelled with pride as she watched David help Lily navigate the crowd with patience and grace. The gallery director gave a speech about Elena's unique artistic vision, how her deafness informed her exploration of silent communication through visual media. Critics approached with questions about technique and inspiration, and Elena answered with the same controlled competence she brought to business negotiations. But her awareness kept circling back to David and Lily standing near her favorite piece, a digital painting called The Sound of Being Heard that depicted hands forming sign language against a background of pure color. An art critic whose work Elena recognized approached David while Elena was being interviewed across the room. She could not hear the exchange, but she watched David's body language shift from polite interest to defensive tension. When the critic walked away, David's face was tight with something that looked like hurt mixed with anger. Elena crossed to him immediately, her hands moving in quick question. He asked if I was your date or your charity case. David's signs were sharp with residual frustration. Wanted to know if you were using me for some kind of social statement about class and disability. What did you say? Elena asked, her own anger rising. I said I was your partner, that you chose me because of who I am, not what I represent, that our relationship is not performance art. David's expression softened slightly, but it reminded me that people will always question what you see in a repair technician. They can question all they want. Elena took his hands in hers, making sure he was watching her signs. I see integrity. I see kindness. I see someone who taught his daughter that everyone deserves to be heard. I see the only person who has ever made me feel like being myself is enough. Before David could respond, Elena's father Robert approached with Diane, Elena's mother, trailing reluctantly behind. This was the first time Elena had seen her mother since Christmas, and Diane's discomfort was palpable as she took in the gallery full of people celebrating her daughter's achievement. Robert's signs were smoother now after weeks of practice. Your work is extraordinary, Elena. I am proud of you. The words were simple, but carried weight of too many years without them. Diane's contribution was stilted and clearly forced. Yes, very impressive. Your grandfather would have been pleased. Her eyes kept sliding away from Elena's face, unable to maintain contact, unable to bridge 13 years of emotional distance with polite compliments at a gallery opening. Thank you for coming. Elena's response was carefully neutral. Mother, this is David Brennan and his daughter Lily. David, Lily, my parents Robert and Diane Morrison. Diane's assessment of David was quick and dismissive, taking in his rented tuxedo and obvious working-class background in a single glance. Pleasure to meet you. The words carried no pleasure whatsoever. Robert at least extended his hand for a genuine handshake, his expression more curious than judgmental. Lily, oblivious to adult tensions, tugged on Diane's expensive dress. Miss Elena's grandmother, did you see the painting of hands? It is the most beautiful thing I ever saw. Your granddaughter is amazing. Diane looked down at the child with something approaching horror, as if the concept of being called grandmother by a stranger's child was too horrifying to process. I am not her grandmother. Elena does not have children. The casual cruelty of the words hit Elena like a slap, the automatic dismissal of any connection to David and Lily, reducing them to temporary distractions rather than people who mattered. Before Elena could respond, David placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. Come on, sweetheart. Let's go look at the other paintings. He led the little girl away with quiet dignity, but Elena saw the hurt in both their faces. She is 7 years old. Elena's voice cut through the gallery noise, sharp enough that nearby conversations paused. She was being kind to you, and you hurt her deliberately. Diane's face flushed. I simply stated a fact. You are not her mother. No, but I could be. Elena's declaration rang through the sudden silence, and she would be lucky to have David as a stepfather and Lily as a stepdaughter. Much luckier than I have been to have you as a mother. Robert looked stricken, caught between his wife and daughter with no good options. Diane's expression cycled through shock to rage to something that might have been pain before settling back into cold dismissal. If you want to throw away your heritage for a lower-class man and his child, that is your mistake to make. Do not expect us to support it. I have not expected your support since I was 14 years old. Elena's response was ice over fury. I stopped waiting for you to love me when it became clear you were ashamed of me instead. So please go back to your society friends and explain how your disabled daughter embarrassed you again. It is what you do best. Diane turned and left without another word, her heels clicking across the gallery floor. Robert hesitated, his face anguished. Elena, I am sorry. She does not know how to be different than she is. Then she never will. Elena's signs were final. Because I am done trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. Robert nodded slowly, acceptance and regret mingling in his expression. I will work on her. On us. You deserve better. He followed his wife out, leaving Elena standing alone in the middle of her triumph, surrounded by strangers celebrating her art while her family walked away again. David appeared at her elbow, concern written across his face. "Are you okay?" "No, but I will be." Elena leaned into him, letting his solid presence anchor her. "Where is Lily?" "With Connie. She came to support you." David gestured toward the gallery entrance where Connie stood with Lily, the older woman already distracting the child with descriptions of the artwork. The gallery director called for attention, requesting Elena make a speech about her work. She stood before the crowd of 200 people, hands trembling until she slipped on Lily's knitted gloves for courage, and began to sign while the ASL interpreter translated her words. "Thank you for celebrating art with me tonight, but I want to talk about more than paintings. When I lost my hearing at 14, I lost more than sound. I lost my voice in ways that had nothing to do with speaking ability. Society said I was broken, that I should adapt to the world rather than expect the world to adapt to me. I spent 13 years proving I was not broken by building a company, winning awards, becoming a CEO." She paused, looking directly at David, but I was still silent inside, because I could not connect, could not let anyone close enough to hear my heart. Then I met two people who did not care about my achievements. They cared about me. They taught me that silence is not lack of sound. It is lack of being heard. And they hear me. Not my voice, my heart. The crowd applauded, cameras flashing, but Elena's attention stayed on David and Lily, the two people who had given her back her voice in ways that had nothing to do with ASL or lip reading or expensive interpreters. The rest of the evening blurred past in interviews and sales and congratulations, but the core truth remained. She had won professionally and personally, proved her worth to the world, and found people who valued her without needing proof. Near midnight, as the gallery was closing, Victoria appeared unexpectedly. Elena's older sister looked different somehow. Her usual armor of designer perfection slightly dimmed, her expression uncertain in ways Victoria never allowed. "I saw your speech online." The words came slowly, difficult. It was moving. Elena waited, unwilling to make this easier for her sister after weeks of betrayal and manipulation. Victoria continued, struggling visibly with each phrase. "I want to apologize. For Christmas, for the board meeting, for everything. Watching you tonight, seeing you willing to risk everything for love, I realize you are braver than I am. I married money than status. You chose your heart." Apology accepted. Elena's signs were careful, testing. But rebuilding trust takes time, I know. Victoria's face showed genuine regret for perhaps the first time in their adult lives. "Can I start trying?" Elena considered her sister, this person who had hurt her so many times, but who was also the only sibling she would ever have. "Yes, you can start. But from the beginning. Like we just met and you want to know who I am now, not who you remember." Victoria nodded, clearly relieved to have any opening at all. "Thank you. That is more grace than I deserve." After Victoria left, Elena and David and Lily rode back to Queens in David's old Honda, exhaustion settling over all three of them like a blanket. Connie had invited them to stop at her apartment for a small celebration dinner, and Elena found herself surrounded by people who had known her less than a month, but loved her more than family who had known her for 27 years. Over rice and beans and roasted chicken that tasted like home, Elena made an announcement that had been forming in her mind through all the week's challenges. "I am restructuring my work life. 4 days a week in the office instead of 6. I am promoting Maggie Chen to Chief Operating Officer so I can delegate daily operations and focus on strategy. I need balance between building a company and building a life. Maggie will be amazing." David's signs held pride and support. "But are you sure the board will accept reduced hours? The board works for the shareholders, and I am majority shareholder through my grandfather's estate." Elena's response was firm. "They can accept that I work smarter instead of longer, or they can watch me deliver results that prove them wrong. Either way, I am not sacrificing my life for a job title ever again." Connie raised her glass of cheap wine in a toast. To Elena, who has everything but finally knows what matters. The others joined in, and Elena felt tears prick her eyes at the simple acceptance, the uncomplicated love from people who had no agenda beyond wanting her happy. Later, alone with David on Connie's fire escape while Lily slept inside, Elena broached the subject that had been building since Christmas. My penthouse has 4 bedrooms. Empty rooms I never use. What if eventually, when you are ready, you and Lily moved in? David's expression held conflict, desire warring with pride. Elena, that is Racy, your home, your space. Lily and I would be guests in a place we could never afford. Or you could be family in a home that is finally full. Elena took his hands in hers. I am not asking you to move tomorrow. I am asking you to consider someday. When it feels right. When Lily is ready. No pressure. What about Lily? David's concern shifted to his daughter, moving her from Queens to Manhattan, from her school and friends, from everything familiar. That is huge. Then we take it slow. Family therapy like we discussed for Jessica's visits, school consultations. Let Lily set the pace. Elena's practicality reasserted itself. But David, I want a future with you and Lily. Not someday vaguely, specifically. I want to build a life together, whatever shape that takes. David pulled her close, his face buried in her hair, and Elena felt his tears wet against her neck. I love you. I should have said it before now, but I was scared. Scared you would realize I am just a repair technician who can barely afford rent. Scared you would leave when the novelty wore off. I love you too. Elena signed the words against his chest. And I am scared too. Scared I will fail at being part of a family because I never learned how. Scared Lily will decide she does not want a deaf stepmother. Scared we are too different to make this work. But you taught me something important. Fear is not a reason to quit. It is just proof that something matters enough to be worth the risk. They sat together on the fire escape watching snow begin to fall over Queens, and David signed against the cold air. They say love conquers all. I do not believe that, but I believe love gives you reason to conquer anything, and that is enough. 6 months later, Elena stood in her Morrison Digital Arts corner office watching the June sun paint Manhattan gold. Maggie knocked and entered with quarterly reports showing revenue up 12%, employee satisfaction at record highs, 3 new major clients signed. The company was thriving under Elena's new work-life balance, proving that a CEO who had a life outside the office made better decisions than one who treated the job as identity. David's electronics repair shop had expanded to 3 locations, all in Queens, employing 7 technicians total. Elena had connected him with corporate clients who needed reliable IT repair services, but David had insisted on maintaining his walk-in business for neighborhood residents who could not afford big companies. His success came from integrity rather than exploitation, and Elena loved watching him build something meaningful on his own terms. Every Sunday, they gathered at David's apartment for family dinner, a tradition that now included Connie and her grandchildren, Robert, who was slowly rebuilding relationship with Elena, Maggie and her partner, and occasionally Victoria, who was learning to be a sister rather than a judge. The apartment was crowded and loud and filled with the kind of chaotic love Elena had dreamed about as a child. Jessica's supervised visits with Lily happened twice a month, the little girl slowly learning to trust that her mother would not disappear again. Family therapy helped all of them navigate the complicated dynamics of a child with 2 mothers who loved her differently. Elena never tried to replace Jessica, just offered Lily a different kind of maternal presence built on reliability and unconditional acceptance. After dinner on a perfect June Sunday, Lily presented Elena with a ring pop, her small face serious with the importance of her mission. Miss Elena, will you be my mom? For real? Not just pretend? Elena dropped to her knees, pulling the child into her arms. Yes, but we will do it right. Adoption lawyers, proper process, making sure it is what you really want. Because this is forever. And will you marry Daddy? Lily's question carried hope and certainty in equal measure. Elena looked up at David, who stood watching with tears in his eyes. If he will have me. David crossed to them, kneeling beside his daughter, pulling a modest ring from his pocket. He had been saving for 3 months, and the ring was small, but perfect. A simple band with a tiny diamond that represented everything they had built together. Elena Morrison, CEO, artist, survivor, love of my life. His voice shook with emotion. Will you marry a repair technician from Queens who adores you? Yes. Elena spoke and signed simultaneously. 1,000 times yes. The wedding planning began immediately. Elena suggesting the Plaza Hotel before David countered with Connie's backyard. People will judge, Elena had warned. Let them. We are not marrying them. So Connie's tiny Queen's backyard it was, small and meaningful and exactly right. But before the wedding could happen, Elena had one more piece of unfinished business. She started volunteering at a community center in Queens that served deaf and hard-of-hearing residents. One evening she saw a young woman sitting alone in the corner, crying silently in that particular way deaf people cried when they forgot anyone might be watching. Elena recognized the devastation in her posture, the defeat in her shoulders. She crossed the room and signed, "Are you okay?" The young woman looked up, shock and hope mingling in her expression. Elena continued, "I am Elena. I am deaf too. Whatever happened, you are not alone." The woman, Maria, had just lost her job. They said deaf people could not do customer service, that communication barriers made her unemployable. Elena felt rage on her behalf mixed with recognition of her own past struggles. "They are wrong. Come to my office Monday morning. I am hiring. You do not need experience. You need opportunity, and I am giving you one." Maria's tears shifted from despair to gratitude, and Elena felt something complete in her chest. She had been given a second chance by a stranger in a mall food court who signed "Come home with us." Now she was passing that gift forward, creating the opportunities she wished had existed for her younger self. Christmas Eve arrived exactly 1 year after the night Elena had sat crying alone in Oak Ridge Mall. Now she stood in David's apartment that she had helped him purchase through a down payment that was gift rather than loan, watching Lily decorate the tree with ornaments they had collected together throughout the year. David cooked in the kitchen, more confident now with Elena's encouragement and Connie's patient teaching. The apartment was full of people, an ever-expanding family of choice that included Maria and Sarah, two deaf employees from Elena's company who had become friends rather than just staff. Robert arrived with gifts and apologies, his relationship with Elena healing slowly through consistent effort. Victoria came too, tentative but genuine, learning to be an aunt to Lily rather than a critic of Elena's choices. Even Diane had sent a card, awkward and insufficient, but a gesture toward possible future reconciliation. As midnight approached and snow began to fall outside, Elena stood by the window wearing the gloves Lily had made her a year ago, worn now, but treasured. David appeared beside her, sliding his arm around her waist. "1 year ago, I sat alone in a mall, wondering if anyone cared I existed." Elena's hands moved slowly, thoughtfully. "I had everything money could buy, nothing that mattered. And now?" David asked, knowing the answer but wanting to hear it anyway. "Now I have a company I run on my terms, a family I chose who chose me back, a daughter who calls me mom and means it, a husband who loves me for exactly who I am." Elena turned to face him fully. "I am still CEO, still deaf, still fighting battles, but now I fight for something worth protecting. This family, this love, this life we built together." David kissed her gently, and Lily cheered from across the room where she was showing Maria how to make origami ornaments. Connie started singing Christmas carols in Spanish that Elena could not hear but could feel in the vibrations of joy filling the small apartment. Robert helped Lily with the tree topper, his grandfather instincts finally finding expression after too many years dormant. Elena looked around at the chaos and love and imperfect beauty of the life she had found, and understood finally what her grandfather had tried to teach her before he died. Success was not measured in revenue or awards or proving people wrong about disability. Success was measured in moments like this, when you looked around and felt grateful for every person in the room, when you belonged not because you had earned it through achievement, but because you had been brave enough to accept unconditional love. Outside the window, Queens spread out in all directions under fresh snow, and in the distance, Manhattan gleamed with its towers of wealth and power. Elena had access to both worlds now, but her heart belonged here in this cramped apartment with these people who had given her back her voice by teaching her that being heard had nothing to do with sound and everything to do with being seen for who you truly were beneath all the armor and achievement. "Family is not who you are born to," Elena signed the words to herself, watching her reflection in the dark window. "It is who chooses to stay." And in the warm light behind her, reflected in the glass, she could see everyone who had chosen to stay, who had looked at her and decided she was worth the effort of learning a new language, worth the complexity of loving someone different, worth everything. She turned from the window and walked back into the warmth, ready for whatever came next, knowing she would face it not alone, but surrounded by people who heard her heart.